So my accountant said to me, you need to think about winding this business up. You're in a huge hole of debt. I had 30 odd staff, friends and family's money on the line, all of my money on the line. I had a week about feeling sorry for myself and moping around. And then I was like, you know what? If it's going to fail, then it's going to fail with me, like, going for it, right? So got in, we got super creative, just brought a new energy to it, and it started working. We were then trading in profit, but the backlog, we couldn't pay it down quick enough. So I said, I'm going to open another one.
Whoa.
Wow.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mind Movers. So as you all may remember, we're doing a special mental health series to help dentists across the board that may be suffering over a lot of topics. And today I have an amazing guest, Loui Blake. Loui is a very good friend of mine, and he is somebody that really helped me massively in what I would call my healing journey. He's a plant-based entrepreneur, and he's a speaker and an angel investor. He started out in football and then nightlife, and then switched to a plant-based diet in 2015. And this whole change caused Loui to refocus his attention on businesses that make positive impact on the world through food. He's also a founder and an award-winning entrepreneur. And in 2020, Loui and partners set up Game Changers Investments, designed to provide opportunities to the hospitality industry with a portfolio of brands operating across the UK, USA, and the UAE. So he's a very impressive individual, but also very open and just amazing. So I'm very excited to have him here today.
Welcome, Loui.
Thank you.
How did you guys meet?
So it's a bit of an interesting one. I think that just shortly after lockdown, something within me told me that I needed to make some changes in my life to help my mental health. And it's funny because when people look at me, they're often like, well, there's nothing wrong with you, Rhona, as in like you don't have any addictions, as it were, you know, like we just talked about with being teetotal, didn't we? And they thought, what's wrong with your mental health? And I just knew that I always found myself in a really anxious state, or I had a real sense of imposter syndrome, or this sense of real like impending doom. Now, once I kind of have hit rock bottom, I didn't really know how to navigate it. And I'd met two guys that own a company called Dirty, and they're like the mushroom coffee. I think you've
I've bought it.
Did you buy it? Interesting.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Like it?
Tasty.
He's an investor, that's why he's asking. So
the ads are brilliant.
yeah,
The ads are super. I bought it twice now.
yeah, because you were like, oh my god, my brain's getting
Once
better.
I bought the brain health one, and then the other time I bought the immune system one.
Yeah.
It's good to know the marketing works.
Yeah. So anyway, I had reached out to one of them because they were developing the products at the time, or like developing the kind of marketing around it. Talked to me a lot about how good mushrooms were for your mind, etc. Talking about their products, etc. And I said, you know what, I really want to find a community that can help me. And I always said that I really wanted to do the work, but I didn't really know what doing the work meant. And I was like chasing this thing. And I think as a dentist, because we're academics, we're like, right, we know if we revise this for the exam, we can put this input, we get this output. And I was like, I want to input the work to be better, to feel healthier, to have my mind in a space where I don't feel like I'm going crazy, essentially. So they got me in touch with another guy called Alex, and Alex runs a retreat, and he runs the retreat with Loui and another girl called Luana. And I decided to go on the retreat, and that's where I met Loui, and I found him to be one of the coolest kids. He kind of reminded me of Peter Pan in some way visually. I was like, he looks so cool. And I learned a lot from Loui, and I think what's been interesting is because we've been friends now for just over a year, I think, and he's watched me grow, as it were, and I think that like I attribute a lot of my healing to things that he's put into place for me and helped me, and I think that's because he's been through his own journey, and that's why I really wanted him to come on this podcast so he could help people in the same way he's helped me.
Amazing.
Thank you.
So this retreat, was it business as well?
No, it was entirely accidental. It was born out of, I guess, my own journey and reaching a point where, you know, like probably many people can relate to, reaching a point where I was probably in my mid-20s. On the surface, had achieved a lot of the things that I thought you were supposed to do to be happy, right? I followed the societal narrative of what happiness was, had a nice car, had a nice house, had a business, was going out and partying and all of the things that, you know, you were kind of told to aim for, should we say, and I was just grossly unhappy and unfulfilled. And at the time, I was probably overindulging in alcohol, in drugs, in partying, and spending money, and not finding any kind of solace or any kind of feeling in any of those things. And I just got to the point where I was just completely numb. And I went on quite an extreme retreat, shall we say, with plant medicine. And I spent a week.
Was that ayahuasca?
I did ayahuasca, yeah.
In Peru?
No, I did it in the UK.
Oh.
And the first day was, the week itself was really the first time I'd sat with myself and held a mirror up to who I really was. And I believe you can get there without the aid of plant medicine. But in the state I was in, I didn't feel I was able to do that. And the first day, I was absolutely disgusted with what I saw. I was really able to take a look at myself and the way that I'd been behaving, the way that I treated myself, the way I treated other people. And I saw that it came from a place of just not liking myself. And that energy was then reflected in the way that I treated others. The next day was just pure compassion for myself and other people. Mm. And some of the tools that I was given on that retreat, I was able to then implement back into my life. And I knew that I needed to make a change. And it coincided with some other lifestyle changes that I'd made. I'd recently adopted a plant-based diet. I'd recognized that perhaps the work I was doing wasn't the most beneficial to my physical or mental health. And I'd made a lot of changes, and that had been the catalyst. And a friend of mine who Rhona mentioned, Alex, had been on a similar journey. But ayahuasca is quite extreme. You know, I don't think it's for everyone. And
it's the second time we've heard it, actually, on this podcast.
Yeah,
that's why Payman's like, wow.
Yeah, it's extreme, right? And I wanted to be able to continue to help myself, but also help other people around me that I saw were in a similar position to me. I had a number of friends that were, making great money. They had businesses that, on the surface looked like they were doing really well. But I knew from the private conversations that we'd had, or I could see in them the same things that I saw in myself, and I wanted to find a way to help them, but perhaps not as extreme as ayahuasca. So Alex and I started just going away ourselves on a weekend. We'd go out to the countryside for 2 days. We'd get an Airbnb, loads of nutritious food. We'd go on long hikes. And then one of our friends came that was a meditation teacher. Then a yoga teacher came. And then all of these, it kind of accidentally turned into this very organic thing that was never monetized, but was purely a coming together of people that were all had a similar intention for healing themselves and each other. And 6 years or so later, it's now become more a thing, but still the kind of the DNA of it is still very much in how do we and what modalities can we bring to people that can help them heal. And different people are going to resonate with different practices, but it's about making these practices available and giving people a start on their healing journey. And that's kind of what it's become about. And we still go on it ourselves to help ourselves in the same way that we did.
So we say, you said it before, this healing word, and you're saying heal. Are we saying that everyone needs healing? Is that the way?
That's
you think
a deep
about
question.
Yeah, I think that for many of us, and when I say many of us, I speak about the world that we live in. We live in London, in a busy urban environment, and what we've experienced over the last 3 or 4 years. As a result of a lot of those experiences and the way that we've lived, I believe, there is a lot of healing that needs to be done. And when I say healing, and these words are thrown around a lot: healing, trauma, etc. And I think it's important that we have a clear understanding of what exactly we're talking about. And trauma can be something as simple as you're 5 years old, you form a bond with your favorite teacher, and at the end of the school year, that teacher leaves. When you look back, when you reflect on that as an adult, it's just a teacher and she left, whatever. As a 5-year-old, that's your first experience of abandonment. There's confusion, there's uncertainty, there's a bond that's been broken unexpectedly. Your response to that situation could be to protect yourself, could be, for example, you don't form tight bonds with adults anymore, right? And then over time, that is compounded. It's a behavior that's learned. It becomes a subconscious behavior. and it becomes part of your personality. And so when you're into your adult life, this is a behavior that may have served you as a child, but now is no longer serving you as an adult. But it happened so long ago that you've forgotten about it. And until we can reflect on our trauma, right, free from the I guess the connotations of the word and the confusion around the word, when we can reflect on our experiences, we can start to understand sometimes why we behave the way that we behave. And this is what comes up a lot of the time when we go into these kind of retreats or work with plant medicines. We're able to revisit traumatic experiences that happened in the past, understand our response, and look upon them from a different perspective and form a new response. I think being in London, even the time for reflection in these busy urban lives that we live just isn't there.
I think that's really important, and I think that, you know, it's in what I found such a disconnect in dentistry for me is that the behaviours that are learned, as you said, are very much in an environment that is very strict. Like a lot of the dentists that I met felt that pressure to become dentists or pressure to do medicine, and they don't necessarily want to do it. And there's a lot of, like, as you described, learnt behaviours. Now, the problem is as well is that when I try to, like, as I've been speaking more and more about my journey, people are like, oh my God, this is so relatable, this is so great. But as you talk about trauma, as you said, it could be a little trauma that makes you behave in a certain way. An interesting thing that someone said to me yesterday, and I'm going to put it out there, is that he asked me, he said, we have the luxury to have mental health in our modern world because someone that's... Mental health problems. He said, because actually, if you're in India and you're on the road and you're like, you don't even know when you're going to eat next, you don't have the luxury to be depressed in the same way we do. And I was like, no, I don't agree with you, but I want to know what you make of that as well, as somebody that has explored the notion of trauma.
I think it's we live an overly complicated existence from that which the existence that people lived maybe 100 years ago, 200 years ago, right? It's overly complicated. I think we have a poverty of choice as it relates to almost everything in our lives. You know, people were very happy with 4 TV channels 30 years ago, and now we can't find anything to watch when we've got Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, etc. Right? So this poverty of choice actually prevents us from being able to choose anything, and there's an anxiety that goes with that, or a perceived choice. Let's say you see it reflected in relationships. We've got a dating app with thousands of people, Instagram with thousands of people. So I think there's a luxury in the sense of perceived choice, which can bring on feelings of anxiety, etc. as well. And as you speak about maybe someone on a road in India, there's not the same degree of choice that goes with that. You are in the situation you're in. I also think it's a lot to do with challenge and discomfort. We have a society that, you know, quite rightly has evolved to be incredibly safe, incredibly convenient. But with that, when we lose challenge and opposition, we become very comfortable. And then when challenge and opposition meets us, we find ourselves unprepared to meet it unless we opt into those challenges and we choose situations where we can contest ourselves. So I think it's an interesting theory. There has to be a reason that we're experiencing such high rates of suicide, depression, anxiety in this modern culture, despite the degree of comfort and convenience and choice that we have.
But also, I think the thing is, and following on from that, I think there's a degree of guilt because when people do have mental health issues, because we still have those labels and stigmas to say, well, you have everything. You have the perfect life. You have a social life. You have a good job. You have parents that love you. You can't have mental. You have everything going for you. And I think that's the problem. And that's what leads to...
That's a problem.
You don't have the conversations, and then that can lead to problems like suicide. You know, where people feel like I don't have a way out. I feel guilty living in the fire of my mind. Do you see what I mean?
It's contextual, right?
Yeah.
It's contextual. Our baseline is independent to us in the way that we've grown up and evolved. You could say that one person has it better than the other, but it's relative to that person.
Yeah. So I was going to actually ask you this, Loui. You're definitely a very ambitious person, right? I mean, you were just telling me you've got 14 brands that you franchise amongst all the other things you do. Maybe, I'm seeing it now with dentists. To become a dentist these days, you have to be a straight A, top of your class. That starts at 12 years old.
Yeah.
You know, it really does, because you're not going to become that straight A guy overnight. And then I see these younger dentists now who are really stressed out about something, whether it's we've got problems with people suing us or time management or burnout or all these different things. And I think to myself sometimes that it's like your perceived position of where you thought you would be compared to where you're at ends up that disconnect between those two. So if you thought you were going to be a Nobel Prize scientist, it doesn't matter. You could achieve 100 times more than me and Rhona, but if you didn't get your Nobel Prize, you could be depressed. And this is what you're saying, the context of where we are. Where did you think you would be?
Context is important.
Yeah.
For me, one of the things that I've learnt recently, and I'm not saying that I'm someone that enjoys perfect mental health. I don't think anyone does, right? Yeah. I would say that I'm certainly in a better position today than I was last year, and the year before that, and the year before that. So it's been a progressive thing, and I feel happy most of the time, if I'm completely honest. That being said, one of the things that I've learned and that's helped me the most in the last 2 years is to prioritize systems over goals. Because when we set goals and aspirations as ambitious people, we attach all of this meaning to this future thing that we're going to achieve. It takes us out of the present. We work towards this goal. We actualize it, and we're like, it doesn't feel how I thought it was going to feel.
Yeah, so true. And dentists do it all the time.
And it pulls us out of the experience of where we're currently living, and that's all there is. We only have this present moment. There's nothing outside of that. The future, the past, they don't exist. We are where we are, right? So what I've learned to do more recently is, and I have to physically write a list for this. What are the things that, if I could have the perfect day, what would go into that day? And how can I systemize it? So for me, it's like, I really enjoy meditation in the morning because it keeps me still the first part of the day and it allows for me to be present and wake up nicely. Okay. I love going for a sauna in the morning. I love having breakfast with my friend. I love reading for 15. Just little things that I love doing that if I've done them in a day, I can feel happy about it, right? And then you start to think, well, okay, let's remove any kind of restriction on that. What does it look like? I want to see my parents every day. I want to have lunch with my friends every day. I want to work on a creative project every day. Okay, what does a perfect week look like? Because I can't do everything in a day. Maybe I want to go every week. I want to take 2 days to go for a weekend away somewhere, or I want to go swimming once a week. Whatever it might be, it's going to be specific to the individual, right? And then you say, well, every month I'd like to go on holiday once, wherever it might be. And I map this out. And then how can I systemize this so that this shows up every day, week, and month? And then each day when I go to bed and I journal, I reflect on the day and how many of those things have shown up in my day. And invariably, if 80% of those things have shown up in my day, I've had a pretty good day, right? As opposed to, here's this goal in 6 months' time or 12 months' time. Let me work towards it. And it's very difficult to refocus on that goal every day or be attached to that goal because what you're doing day to day doesn't necessarily always relate to it. But creating these systems has been the kind of cornerstone of me being in a good mental space because I'm doing things that move me in the right direction and not backward from that. And I think you have to do some playing around to understand what that's going to be for you. Journaling isn't something that I've ever done until this year. I tried to do it in the mornings. I tried 3 or 4 times. Did a day, 2 days. Didn't get anything from it. This year, I bought a guided journal for the evenings. Game changer. Before I go to bed, I pour out all of the stuff I'm carrying around onto a page.
And that was actually something I did. So when Loui told me that, and I actually wrote down, I don't know if you remember me telling him the first retreat, he said, what would your perfect day look like? What would your perfect week look like? Etc., etc., etc. And then you don't see it as goal driven because it's like, it's not about what I want, it's what I already have in a way, but need to spend more time doing because it's things that I enjoy. And I think that takes the pressure off things as well.
It makes it more the journey rather than the destination or whatever. That sort of cliche in the end. But there's a good reason that you talk about that. And you're also right in so much as the destination often isn't what you think it's going to be. Do you think that you're in this sort of purpose-led businesses that around veganism and all of that? Would you say that's part of the reason why you spend time on it? That you want that purpose and that whole world to grow? And, when I think about it, okay, I'm in the world of making people's teeth whiter. Does it inspire me as much as, getting rid of plastic inspires you, or getting the world to become vegetarian or vegan inspired? Is it an important part of
I think
spending your day? Like, not everyone's in the purpose. Some people build this.
Yeah. I think that when you say purpose, it doesn't necessarily have to be related to the outcome of what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
It could be you love making furniture because the purpose of you making furniture is to do something where you're present for long periods of time.
Yeah.
For you. It doesn't have to be for anyone else.
In the moment.
Yeah. Right? The purpose is... And equally, I think there's a lot of pressure at the moment for us all to make impact, especially among young people. Yeah. And whenever I do talks and there's a young audience, it's all about, I want to make an impact. But I encourage people, and this is one of the, I think, the important things of self-introspection and self-reflection is why? Yeah. Why do you want to make an impact? And one of the things I realized early on was it's just the ego shifting, right? I wanted to, when I first started in business, I just wanted to do something that I loved. It was like, what do I love doing? What can I get paid for that's fun, rather than having to sit in an office or anything? And I used to love football, and I found a way to get paid from football. And it was like, well, I'm not really making enough money. What else do I like doing where I can make more money? And then it became about the money, and it wasn't that I didn't enjoy it, so to speak, but it became very money driven. And that lack of purpose for me, there needed to be something there where I could find a value beyond just me getting something from the exchange. So, but then when I went into the whole the vegan thing, for a while, I didn't recognize it, but it was just my ego shifting. It wasn't that I wanted to make an impact particularly, it was that I wanted to be seen to make an impact by other people. Mm.
And did your plant medicine journey sort of...
It showed me that you can't hide from that.
Because it kind of separates your ego from you.
Of course, it's ego dissolution. You have to... this is where I say it's one of the most challenging things you can do, because you can lie. You think you can lie to other people, and you think you can lie to yourself because you don't sit with yourself. If you're distracted 24/7, you can lie to yourself. You wake up, you're straight on the phone, you go downstairs, you're having a conversation, you walk to work, your headphones are in, you go to work, you're talking to people all day, you come home, you watch TV, you're talking, you go to sleep. You haven't had a moment of introspection at all. But the minute you spend time by yourself, or you're forced to, and especially when it's assisted by something that's really showing you yourself, that's when you can't lie. And that's when it comes up and you're forced to face it. And it's why a lot of people have a difficult time with it. It's because it's showing you who you really are.
I think one of the other things that just came up whilst you were speaking is that people also, what I find really difficult, and particularly in the dental arena, but not even just in the dental arena in general, and I hate to generalize, but particularly with Gen Z, is they say, I want to make an impact, I want to be at the top, but they don't want to do the stuff in between, or recognize how there's sometimes a struggle. And I think you guys saw me recently talk in a podcast about how people tend to avoid struggle. One of the big things I learned from Loui as well is to lean into discomfort. It's very difficult in dentistry to do that because you're used to being the number one. You are conditioned to be number one. And actually, if you show weakness, it's not something that's celebrated at all. It's something like, well, this has been flagged up, work on it to be better next time. And that's where I think is the shift in my own mind, because of the things that you show me, is that sometimes there's a struggle, sometimes you're weak. And actually now, when I go through those struggles, I'm like, it's not great, it's uncomfortable, but sit with it and sit with it alone, carrying on from what you said. Just be okay about sitting with it, And I think that when you change that and don't go into panic mode straight away, it's a really powerful thing. It's difficult, but it's...
self-regulation.
Yeah.
Right? It's like when something comes up and can you observe the response rather than being the response? Yeah. So if something happens and your heart starts beating, you tense up, can you witness that? The space between exactly. And there's ways that you can train that. Again, systems can train you for that. I know that, for example, if I get up early and I do my meditation and I walk to the gym and I do my session, I do my sauna, before I do my first call, that person on the call is getting the best version of me. Because I've been present, I've exercised, I've put myself in a very uncomfortable position in a sauna where I'm resisting, and I've started my day in that way. So I'm primed. If I wake up late and I've eaten before I've gone to sleep and I've had a bad night's sleep and I get on the phone,
kills me.
This person's getting a different version of me, right? So it's creating systems where you know that you're going to be the best version of you is going to show up for that experience. And when you're not, recognizing that as well, right? It's like we're not all perfect all the time. I've certainly, like even today, I got a message from someone that works for me and I snapped. And I caught myself and I went, oh, interesting. I didn't hate myself for it. I didn't say, that's now who I am. So I apologized. So I'm sorry, that was me, it wasn't you. How can I help? What can I do? It's catching yourself. We're all going to do it.
Yes, I mean, catching behaviours has also been something, like literally just 2 minutes before Loui came on, I got a message from one of my colleagues and it triggers me. And when I'm triggered, I'm really reactive. I'll be like, no, and I get really defensive. You've probably seen it with me as well. But now, and you even commented recently, I'm like, this person wrote this because of their own issues and I'm projecting because I still have to work on some of mine. So actually don't respond for 5 to 10 minutes. I never used to be able to do that. But it's about creating that awareness. However, the way that you're speaking now is incredibly empowering, incredibly inspiring. But there are some people, I still believe, that just cannot make those changes. They cannot create those systems, like you said, because for them, it's too difficult.
This is the thing. It hasn't got to be in... It's so funny where we go as a culture, isn't it? Like, you look at people, we talk about the need to improve mental health, and then you have a wave of people putting out content that's supposed to be helpful, and it's empowering, and then you get people that put out content that mocks that content. It's like, I wake up, I ice bath, and it mocks it, and it moves people away from it. But actually, it's not about doing everything or about being perfect, and it's also not about comparing yourself to other people. It's, can you compare yourself to what you were doing? So if you're not doing anything at the moment at all, and tomorrow you can say, do you know what? I can spend 1 minute and I'm going to write down 10 things that I'm really grateful for, and I'm just going to reflect on that for a minute. That's better than yesterday.
Sure.
Okay? If you can do that for a week, you've done that for a whole week. See how it feels. Does it feel? Of course it feels good.
Yeah.
Can you then think about, okay, each day, one of my systems is going to be, I'm going to find an opportunity to do something nice for someone today.
Yeah.
If you've got fear over, let's say you've got financial fear.
Yeah.
You're worried about never having enough money. Actually, the solution to that is give money away.
Yeah.
Energetically, you're sending out a signal that, like, I have enough, right? That feeling of doing something nice, even if it's £1 to someone on the street, that feeling of doing something nice for someone, it feels good. Reflecting on what you're grateful for, it feels good. When stuff feels good, we're more inclined to do it again and repeat it. But it's habit stacking. It's doing one thing at a time. So starting with one thing, finding the things that you find beneficial, right? Not everyone's going to enjoy doing ice baths or get anything from it. Not everyone's going to enjoy
Have you
sauna.
done it, Payman?
No, cold showers.
Cold showers are great. Absolutely great. But there's a feeling with that. If I've done nothing else today, I've had a cold shower and I didn't want to do it, but I did it.
Yeah.
And there's a feeling of achievement that goes with that. And stepping into discomfort is an antidote to reacting when uncomfortable things come up, because you meet it prepared, as opposed to stuff happening to you. And we talked about being victimhood before, right? Stuff happens to us. We're the victim. We're not ready. Whereas if you've actively sought discomfort in your day already, and discomfort comes, you're like, I'm prepared for this.
Do you know what also it reminds me of? Do you remember the Sunscreen song with Baz Luhrmann? Have you guys heard it? You must know it. I'm not going to sing it, mate. I'm not going to sing it. Either one of you.
I don't know what you're talking
You would have heard it before, but he basically talks through it, and he does do one thing every day that scares you.
Yeah.
Do you know the song, right? Yeah. So I think that is true, and I think that relating it back to dentists again, thinking about that, they always think. They might see the shiny image on Instagram and they're like, she's done it through just doing, it fell out the sky. She got lucky, you know? And I've talked about this where I'm not into luck. I guess last week was like, I do believe in luck. I really don't believe in luck. I'll stand by this. It's when preparation meets opportunity. And like you said, it's doing those small changes every single day, being prepared, and then something will happen. But for me, I just put in so much hard work because all I knew is that I did not want the life that I was living at that time. I didn't enjoy the practice I was working with. I wasn't making good money. I wasn't giving patients the best care. I did not like my life. No one would give me a job. I used to apply for jobs. I'd CV drop. No one would, because they were like, who is this like absolute joker in these clothes, like thinking she's going to be a dentist. So I changed it, like you said, because I was like, okay, so no one wants to do it. What can I do? And it was by looking at people who had achieved things through adversity and struggle.
Is it fair to say that that's a catalyst then, and that without coming to that bottom point, you would not be where you are now? There's a book I bought for a few people recently, called Courage is Calling. It's one of the
where is my copy?
Ryan Holiday writes a series, but it's fantastic. But it's a collection of historical examples of people that have achieved amazing things. But the consistent theme is they've achieved them as a result of incredibly challenging things, and that nothing, essentially it shows that through numerous examples throughout history, that nothing is achieved without struggle and suffering, and often, very often, the extent of the struggle depicts the extent of the achievement that follows it. And so it's being able to train ourselves that when we're in uncomfortable situations or challenging situations, that this is what we actually need to then go out and get what we want. And just to extend that, is that very often when we think about what we'd like, the first thing that happens is things that are seemingly things that we don't want to happen. But often that's clearing the way for that stuff to come in, right? It's like, I really want this. And then you lose your job. You're like, oh, I've lost my job. But you said you wanted that. You have to lose the job to create space to go and get that. And it's training ourselves to step into the unknown, step into the fear, without having to have everything figured out. But there's a trust that needs to be built in the process.
In the process,
in the process, which is I know how scary that is, right?
So Loui, what things have you gone through that are like that? And I mean, you must have been through so much through business and all that.
Yeah, I've got some good ones.
Yeah, go on. Nothing's off limits.
Tell us some of your darkest days and what you learned from them.
Okay. So I can use a few examples. So I opened a restaurant. And when I opened the restaurant, I had enough money to pay the rent deposit, the first 3 quarters rent, and that was it. I needed another 270,000 to actually build the restaurant and open it, which I didn't have. But I signed a 15-year lease anyway, because I thought energy, intention, momentum, I'm going to figure it out. And I did figure it out, but a lot of that investment came from extra work that I went off and did, family, friends, etc. Right? So I've put all the money I have in the world in. I've put friends and family's money in. I've moved back home at the age of 26, and I've built this restaurant. And went really, really well. Super busy, all over Instagram, press, whatever. 12 weeks in, I thought, this is great. I'm going on holiday for a week because I've worked 12 weeks every day straight. Get to LA. Get a phone call. Oh yeah, the chefs quit, the sous chefs quit. In the middle of service, people are walking out. What do we do? Fly back. Haven't got a chef. You try finding a specialist vegan chef 6 years ago. Very difficult. And so for 3 months, we barely traded. And the cash flow just went like this. Ran out of money. I was in there every day, morning, lunch and evening. I had another business that I was working in, so I was going between the 2 businesses. Wasn't paying myself. Couldn't find anyone, and I got to the point 6 months later where we'd gone through a few different chefs, and my accountant said to me, you need to think about winding this business up. You're in a huge hole of debt, and it's getting to the point where you need to think about liquidating. But I had 30 odd staff, friends and family's money on the line, all of my money on the line, and I'd put this thing everywhere, and on the surface, on Instagram, on everything, it looked like it was killing it. And I just remember just thinking, if this wasn't such a mess, if I wouldn't leave such a mess, I don't want to be here, because it's such a mess, and I don't know what I'm going to do after this. And at that point, I'd had different companies, and it was like I felt like I had all this potential, but I never actually realised it. And this was the thing that was going to make me realise it, and it was dead. And so I had a week about feeling sorry for myself and moping around, and then I was like, you know what? if it's going to fail, then it's going to fail with me like going for it, right? So let me see how far. Like, what is the worst that can happen? He's already told me I have to liquidate. Like, what's the worst? They can turn up, take the debt collector's going to take stuff. Like, fine, I'll get it to that point. So basically, I coincided with, I found a chef. I took a chance on a really young chef. I promoted some of the other guys. We got super creative, just brought a new energy to it, and it started working. But we couldn't catch the money up quick enough to the debt. And I don't think I've ever said this on a podcast before. So operationally, we were then trading in profit. So we were profitable each week. But the backlog was, we couldn't pay it down quick enough. So I said, I'm going to open another one.
Whoa.
Wow.
Because I know it works.
Yeah.
I've got the model. I figured it out. I knew what days to open, how the shifts would work, how to run it efficiently enough for it to make money and be profitable. And I simplified the menus to the degree that I could have a wider spectrum of potential staff that could work. It wasn't as specialist. And when I dialed down the menu slightly, I dialed down the labour cost, I improved the food cost. I had more staff that were available. We got busier. So I had a good model, but I just had this backlog. So I announced the second opening. I went out to the market. I raised the capital to open another site. I used part of that capital to pay down the debts to the first site.
Where did you get that money from when you went?
Private investors.
Friends and family? Yeah.
Private investors. It wasn't friends and family.
Like angels?
Angels, yeah. And I made a case for it. I said, look, this is how we're trading.
But go on, specifically tell me. If someone wants to raise some money from an angel,
yeah.
Where did you go? Did you go to a place where these guys, like an incubator type place where they're together? Or?
So we started with a crowdfunding campaign.
Uh-huh.
It didn't really work because you have to bring, with crowdfunding, you actually have to bring 60% of the investors on board before it goes live on the platform. So if you raise in 300 grand, you need to raise 180 or so by yourself. So I just went out on LinkedIn. I went out to investors that I knew. I had a fairly good network. So I went out to people that I knew and I just
hands
started
out Chelsea
tickets.
gyms and dodgy saunas. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, but
joking.
So at this time you were, 28 or something?
27, 28, yeah.
That's amazing.
Really
oh my God.
But the point being that when you said about being in those dark positions,
yeah.
It's like you're sat there and like everything that you've built and worked for, you see is about to crumble. And then the same thing happened with COVID, right?
Yeah.
I opened a restaurant 2 days before the first lockdown.
Oh my God.
I'd just signed a 15-year lease on a warehouse to build an indoor football centre. So I had 2 commercial leases that I'd underwritten as the personal guarantor with all of these people that were working in the businesses. And again, investors' money, which I feel responsible for and which, I feel responsible for to the degree that I underwrote the lease, which I'm now still paying for years later because I felt so bad about anyone else taking a risk on my idea, right? Yeah. And so yeah, those positions you get yourself in, and it's tough. It's really tough.
In the time between, we all felt it. In the time between,
what, the lockdown?
In between lockdown and
I
furlough.
signed my practice. I completed a week before national lockdown.
Yeah.
And honest to God, like the loan had gone through and all of a sudden I had all these responsibilities and the practice shut down. And the thing is, as Loui said, but then you pivot and you're like, okay, cool. I'm in this situation now. What do I do? And by the way, there is no shame in packing things up either, because sometimes you've got to do things for you. So when it's reached the end of the line, it's reaching the line. In my case, I was like, I've just bought this practice. I've built it up for 5 years. I've just bought it. So I'm ready to go. And I pivoted. And then when we could open, I'd been the busiest I'd ever been. Dentistry boomed during lockdown.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Who
would have thought that? Because if you were the kind of person that was doing things out of love and purpose for me is always my patients, always, 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 I was like, okay, give them the free advice, help them, do the consultations. They wanted to come to me. So I actually had ability to build rapport with them on digital platforms like Zoom, you know what I mean, before they came into the chair.
Look, from my perspective, right, I look at you, Loui, and you're clearly a purebred entrepreneur. You really are. Just your attitude on risk and optimism and multiple businesses. You maybe I don't know whether you class yourself as one or not, but you definitely are.
Really?
Oh, 100%.
Thanks.
100%. Well, it's not. It doesn't have to be a thanks thing, does it?
But it's also to that point. If I can just add, entrepreneurship has been glamorized in our culture in recent years, right? It wasn't before. But it's this glamorized. And I think the problem with that is that it's put on a pedestal. People think, oh, what an aspirational thing to be an entrepreneur. It's cool. Yeah. But I would probably have a much more peaceful life if I didn't have that. If I didn't want to be that. Probably would, right? You have to understand.
It's just so clear that it's so
you have to understand
opportunity in different places.
Yeah, but that in itself can be a problem,
of course,
right? Because you end up not having a social life, a personal life. You end up putting that stuff in front of other things, which maybe you shouldn't. It goes in front of your health if you're not careful, and the outcome is very often that you're the last person to get paid. Yeah. You carry all of the risk. You carry all of the weight of responsibility. So
what's your attitude to risk? How do you feel about risk? Do you feel like high risk, high return kind of guy?
Yeah. But I think the reason I feel like that, and I guess the reason I feel like that is because I'm young enough and I'm free enough of responsibilities for it to not matter. This is one of the things I can honestly say that I've got from psychedelics and from using psychedelics in a therapeutic setting. And I don't want this to come across the wrong way, and it may be unrelatable, but nothing matters. Nothing matters at all. Nothing actually matters. So let's say, for example, everything that I currently have and I'm doing fails. Tomorrow, I lose everything. I'm bankrupt. I'm on zero. It's never that far away, let's be honest. Right? Because that's the game that I play. I'm high risk, high reward. Let's say it matters. Yeah, it doesn't matter. In fact, there's a sick part of me that kind of wants it to happen just to see if I could come back and just for how much I'd get from it, of the humility of going to nothing, because I do genuinely believe that I would build up again even better than where I am now very quickly. Because all of the things you learn on the way, you don't unlearn them. You don't lose network. You don't even really lose any kind of kudos or reputation, really. Because if you look again through history, you look around, the best entrepreneurs I know have had massive failures. Massive failures. It's part of the process. It's part of the way of learning. When I invest in companies, I very often like to see the founder's background. Have they failed? When have they struggled? When have they had their backs against the wall, and how have they reacted to it? And if they've failed, but out of that they've started another company, it's brilliant. That's someone that I can back, because when it gets difficult, they keep going. And I think that's an important attribute when it comes to mental health, not even as an entrepreneur, as anyone. Can you put yourself in positions to fail? And when you do fail, which you invariably will, how do you come back from it? Can you use that as an opportunity, as a lesson, as a way to learn about yourself and come back up? Because we're all going to go through it. Whether you like it or not, you're better off choosing it than having it happen to you.
And dentistry is a career where we're literally every single thing we do, even if you're at the top, will fail. As in, that's the guarantee we can make. Because patients come in, and one of the things they think is like, they expect a filling to last a lifetime. They expect the root canal to last they expect everything. And dentists, they get such strong anxiety because the thought of failure is so soul destroying to them on every aspect, the academic level, the patient level, the clinical level, everything. But actually, like you said, the one thing that we can guarantee, especially in dentistry, it's going to fail. It's going to fail at some point. So you have to learn to flip that narrative in your mind.
Can you get comfortable with the worst outcome? And this is I had to do this during COVID.
Can you not?
I had to do this during COVID, right? It was like...
Well, I was thinking when you were talking about it, you're obviously not paying school fees.
This is the thing. Challenge him. But challenge him.
Can you get comfortable? But I said that I have the luxury of not having dependables, right? Yeah. I do have dependables because I have commercial leases that I'm personally guaranteed on that I have to pay, right? Or, which is probably the equivalent. That being said, can you get uncomfortable when things are particularly on top? And I had this during COVID when I was looking at everything, and I'm like, and in your head you start to think about what could happen. And I'm like, well, what if I just write it out? What is the worst thing that could happen? I could lose that. I could owe this money on that because of guarantees. I could owe that because of loans that I've guaranteed. These people could hate me. When you actually look at it, you're like, it's not that bad. Is it that bad? Really, is it that bad? can't believe I've not mentioned this yet. You and I talk about this a lot. Foundational to mental health, my belief. Foundational to mental health is spiritual physical health. Physical health, in the sense that if you are eating bad foods, so foods far removed from their original state, heavily processed foods, not exercising, you are not assessing your health, and this could be through testing, whatever. Not getting enough sleep, which is probably the biggest one.
Love my sleep.
Probably the biggest one. Not managing stress, etc. If you are not in a state of physical health, it is very, 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 very likely that you will suffer poor mental health, because it's near impossible to have good mental health in a poor physical form. Near impossible. When you're ill, I was ill for the first time in about 10 years the other week coming back from Mexico. There's nothing that I wanted more in that moment of being ill than just to feel better again. I would have given anything. I felt horrific. I didn't care. I don't care about anything else. And I really thought in that moment, I was like, wow, I take my health. I put a lot of effort into my health and well-being. And in fact, it supersedes anything I do in business, my own physical health. But I thought, wow, I would give anything that I have to feel healthy right now. This is horrible.
I totally agree, and I feel exactly the same way in terms of health. But one thing that I want to carry on from is, like you said, we have the luxury to be able to invest in certain things. But there may be some people that think, I'm a single mum, I've got 3 kids, I'm really depressed, and I can barely make it through the day, and she's on minimum wage, right? And it's a different circumstance, I appreciate. But, there have people been in those situations. What do you think they can do, or do you think that this is a completely different conversation for people?
It's not a different conversation. It's like most of the things that. So let's look at lockdown, for example. Yeah, we were all in that position during lockdown. Couldn't go and use fancy gyms. Couldn't go and use fancy saunas. Couldn't go and do whatever. It's grassroots. We have to look at what are the resources that we all have. Time probably in that situation isn't the most available resource, because you're taking care of somebody else for long periods. But can you get out for a run or a walk? Can you get yourself into cold exposure? Can you spend 10 minutes focusing on your breath? Can you exercise at home? All of these things. Can you get 8 hours sleep? All of these things, which are foundational from a health perspective, are free. You can enjoy free of charge. Can you journal?
Plus, right? Some of the happiest people I've met seen in my life are people with no finances at all. I mean, just go to the third world and look at the smile on people's faces who haven't got anything. And then some of the unhappiest people I know
have everything they got.
Multi-millionaires.
But
they've got loads of money, were born into millions of pounds of and that thing you said about leading into discomfort, and discomfort immunizing you sort of against life's challenges. I don't think, these foundational things that you're talking about, the number of hours you sleep, good and bad food, there's an element of when, you can't afford to buy fresh food. I get that.
Have you ever been to Aldi? I couldn't believe it.
I've never been.
I went to my...
I used to go all the time.
I went to...
When I was living in Kent, it was my local.
I went to my parents live in Norfolk. I go to Aldi. The quality of the fruits and vegetables is incredibly high. Seriously. And I know... bit of vegan, I eat a lot of veg. Very, very high quality fruit and veg.
Yeah.
I had to go and get, I needed like I have ginger every day most mornings, so I was like, I need to get ginger and lemon. I got like sprigs of ginger and a bag of lemons for like 90 pence. So what is this? It's amazing, right? So like, to your point, you could eat, and people, I get the hit with this with the vegan argument all the time. Being vegan's really expensive. Yes, if you go and buy Beyond Meat burgers, or you go to Whole Food or whatever, but if you're buying whole foods, natural foods, It's not expensive.
But also the other thing is, I think it goes back to the same thing over and over again. There is a huge system problem because all the things that you've talked about, which are basic and free to help people and their mental health, is not really given as part of education. Do you know what I mean? Like, not even like, you'd think like, wouldn't everyone know? No, they don't know. I didn't know breath work could help you. I did not know breath work and breathing could literally help you with anxiety.
You two are in that world much more than I am.
But this is what I'm saying.
It's interesting how.
But today, I had a stressful moment earlier. Like, you know, you just get a little bit overwhelmed sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, I had 2 calls happening back to back. That invite hadn't been sent to that person for that call. They missed it. The next call, the notes hadn't been sent. I was like, and I just, when that happens, 2 inhales through the nose and a long inhale through the mouth a couple of times, and I just reset.
Wim Hof style.
It's just like, just down-regulate the system.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how quickly that it works. And this is something that, again, you think, you know, it's free, it's there. And if I knew about this earlier, I could have responded in a different way. But I think it's about spreading awareness of these tools, and this is the kind of the DNA of the retreats. It was like, wow, I've learned these 4 things, and I know these people that would love it who don't know about it. Can we bring them together? And maybe we can share some different reactions to it. Maybe they've got things to share, and you kind of create this co-created space, which is why what you guys do with the podcast is great, because you're going to have people reach out and say, well, that really resonated with me, that bit, and what do you think about this? And it starts conversations. It gets people sharing things, and through different experiences, we discover different tools, and if we can share those tools, everyone gets the benefit.
The reason why we did it, or particularly you came to me, but the reason why I did it was because it's become quite fashionable to talk about mental health.
But you know, Payman can vouch for me in the fact that I've been trying to say this for like a few years, but there was still such a stigma. No, people were like, well, we don't really talk about it. Do you know?
I feel like the stigma we've almost gotten over these days. But that still leaves me in a position where I'm just talking about it and I haven't got actual solutions. And you're talking about
solutions. That's what I'm saying.
This is the problem, right? It's like, it's become fashionable to talk about. People wanted to, and again, whatever the reason, people talk about it because it's fashionable. It gets them views. It gets them likes. But it's the narrative tends to be, let's talk. It's good to talk. Talk to someone. I'm sorry, but when I am in a position where I'm on the brink of losing everything, I can't tell my girlfriend because that's going to put her into a dark place. I can't tell my parents because it can put them in a dark place. I can't tell the people that work with me. Who do I speak to? Am I going to call some random person? There isn't. So for me, personally, the talking thing has never worked. It hasn't. And I think we're guilty of having this one. So if you've got mental health problems, talk to someone. It doesn't work for me.
But
that doesn't work for me. But I found things that do, and these are the tools that I have used that have worked for me. And I think if we all were able to say, when I've suffered, these are the things that I've helped. Some of them may work for you, some won't. That's where we start moving the conversation forward. It's actionable steps, not, oh, let's talk about mental health. I had this, I had that. No, it doesn't.
But you know what? The thing is, like, when we went to the Global Collective thing, do you remember there were so many conversations and people were like, this is all great, but help. And some of them like went as far, the dentists, they were like, can you not talk to the governing bodies that cause us stress? Because like one big thing, for example, the worst thing that a dentist fears is either like being under the scrutiny of a patient and having some kind of like litigious claim, or they're worried about the regulator like coming down on them and their public image being tainted. But like you said, if you become comfortable with the worst outcome, which I'm not saying you have to be happy about it, but if you somehow come to terms that a possibility in your career.
Let's go through it then. Go through it. Let's say you get yourself sued and you get a GDC situation and you can't work as a dentist anymore. Have you gone through that?
Yeah, I think most dentists I think most dentists have gone through that sort of thing. But one thing that I've always thought to myself, you will even in the worst case situation, you will somehow get through it. Now, I am the kind of person to completely lose it in the moment. Like, as in, like, I will break down on my hands and knees. I will scream and cry and be like, I can't get through it. That happened during lockdown. I had to practice. Here's your loan pay. Here's your rent pay. Here's furlough. Sort this out. Here's this. And I was like, I'm not going to get through this. My practice is going to go bankrupt. But I did get through it. Do you see what I mean? And I think, like, there is something in the whole, like, the worst thing for me that holds me back is still, like, but what are people going to think? What are people going to, what's everyone going to think of this if it becomes public? Does that make sense, you know?
Because you're very, very, very high profile now in the world of dentistry, right? So it's almost like you've got more to lose. How do you feel about that? I mean, you said you're up for high risk, high reward. What about when you start a new business? Do you feel
At this point, I don't care. At this point, I don't care.
So, but you know, but there's in your industry, there's people who think of you as a you know, like a player.
Maybe not. But at this point, I honestly don't care, because I've proved in my mind. I think the value, it used to be, and I think it often is for people when they start, they have something to prove to everyone else.
Yeah.
And they're so concerned with proving to other people, they neglect to prove anything to themselves. And no one else can make us feel any way about ourselves other than how we feel about ourselves, right? So for me, I'm like, if I told myself at 22, I'd be doing what I'm doing now at 32, would I be happy? Yes, I'm happy. If the next thing I do fails terribly and everyone gets to see it, but look at all the stuff that I've done.
I love that.
I don't care. Like I could fail the next 5 things that I do. I mean, have you read the Man in the Arena quote? So I've got a football centre up in Norfolk called the Arena, and we've got 4 football pitches, boxing gym, a 20,000 square foot warehouse, built it during lockdown. Really cool space. The quote on the wall as you go in is, I think it's a Theodore Roosevelt quote, "The man in the arena," and I'm not going to read it out, but and people can go and look it up. But effectively, it's the man in the arena that counts, not the ones that are watching. Not the ones talking, not anyone else comment on it. Only the man in the arena knows. So if you've put yourself out there, if you've birthed an idea and put it out for the scrutiny of the world, no one can look on that and say anything. I've put it out there. I've taken action. That is an achievement in itself, whether it works or it doesn't. And if you can then keep doing that after a failure, it's an even bigger achievement. And what's something working and not working? If it works for 2 years, did it work? If it struggles for 10 years and then closes, did it work? If it's there for a month and it burns down, then does it work? Like, what's the definition, right? For me, this, like, you have to set the definition yourself. If I can bring an idea to life, put it out to the world, people get value from it, I can actualize the purpose of what I was intending to do while staying true to my values, and I'm in it doing it, it's succeeding. And if there's at some point where I decide for it not to, or I want to do something else, then it's not.
One of your core values, obviously, is being a vegan. Well, is that even a core value? But, you know, part of your identity. Talk us through.
Ooh, I'm going to challenge that.
Okay, all right, because it's not part of his identity. Well,
no, I just don't think labels are particularly helpful.
Fair enough.
Because I don't subscribe. I don't think anyone can subscribe and say that they do everything they do doesn't harm animals at all. Somewhere along the line, there is some crop that's getting sprayed that I've eaten that's killed a beaver, for example.
Yeah.
Right? At some point, however, I seek to live a life that essentially does no harm to animals or humans, as much as I possibly consciously can. So I don't eat animals. I don't eat animal byproducts. I don't buy animal products as much as I physically can. I don't hold myself to a ridiculous high standard. Like, if I accidentally eat something or buy something, you know, I'm also comfortable enough that I'm making a conscious effort to not to. If it happens, no, it's not the end of the world for me. But I try to, and I think that value system has been really helpful to me in how I conduct myself in business and other situations. I just try not to cause any harm to anyone else.
It's really unfair the way vegans get judged sometimes. It's almost like you've got to be 100% perfect as a vegan, but if you're not a vegan, then
because it's a mirror for people. It's a mirror for people. they see someone else taking an action that they probably know in their heart is probably the right action to take, and it highlights to them that they're not doing it. So the easiest response to that is to make a joke or say something, right?
The thing is, I'm
Are you
in.
vegan?
No, everyone thinks I'm vegan. By the
You
way,
just think you're the type.
do you think so?
Because you
Loui?
look healthy.
Lol. I said it. Lol, babe. Lol. So, the thing is with the whole veganism thing, I'm the sort of person, and genuinely I say this with all my heart, I am the kind of person that respects anybody's decision, and anything that they want to do for themselves, I respect. Even the whole vaccine argument, whoever wanted to take it could, whoever didn't could. There was no judgment. I don't judge people. And the same is with veganism. I tried it. It personally did not work for me for health reasons. Maybe I wasn't doing it correctly. I always make a conscious effort to do things correctly. My body didn't respond that well. I'm Mediterranean. I've been brought up on a Mediterranean diet. Am I still conscious about where my animal sources come from? Absolutely. Do you see what I mean? So, but for me, I'm like, okay, I just feel like my body didn't feel its best, and I tried it for long enough, and that's fine. That's okay, because I believe everybody's different. So that's kind of my stance on it. But I think, Louis not a preacher, by the way. He's never preached to me about and he's been in our sort of group, there's people that are non-vegans as well, and I've never seen, you sort of challenge anybody on their views.
Again, it's like we're all on our own journey and our own path, right? So everyone makes their own choice. If you want to, I'm not going to tell you something you don't want to know. So if someone says to me, "Oh, why are you what makes you think that's a good thing?" I'll have a conversation, but I'm never going to be like, "You should do this because this isn't this," because I don't have context. I don't know if your body type, your backgrounds, your history, all that stuff, right? I just don't know. So I can say that this is what's worked for me. Same as the stuff we're talking about as it relates to mental health. I can only share personal, direct experience. I can't prescribe anything to anyone, and I wouldn't do that. I can only say, this is what this is what's benefited me. This is what I've done. Maybe there's going to be bits of it that you can take that will also work for you. And nothing's really original, is it? Everything that I do, I've taken from someone else at some point and put it together and made it my own thing. So, yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. But it's been amazing for me. I've been on a plant-based diet for 8 years. I get my bloods done regularly.
Do you supplement with all the things that
No, not anymore. I supplement omega-3, 6 and 9, but most people should do that anyway.
B12?
No, I don't supplement B12.
Because it's in your parlour, babe.
There we go.
He's a parlour subscriber.
And no, I just eat a varied, whole food, plant-based diet. And like everyone, I have a treat every now and again. But when I say a treat, I mean I'm still vegan, but not super healthy. But for the most part, it's healthy food. And the reason I do it is because it makes me feel great, and it makes me feel optimal, and it makes me feel that I can show up for myself and other people as the best version of me, because what I'm putting into my body is enabling my body to have the most energy.
I love that.
Do you crave meat or not?
Not at all. I did it overnight, by the way. It was overnight.
So did you crave meat at the beginning?
No.
So how did that work?
Don't know. Just a complete realization.
And what was the catalyst? Did you watch a movie?
Yeah, I watched. Do you know what? At the time, I had a recruitment company, and I was working in nightlife.
I know.
How many businesses have you had?
I don't know.
Seriously, for your age, it's ridiculous.
I know.
So I had a recruitment company. I was working in nightlife. So I was doing recruitment in the daytime and then
nightlife.
nightlife every evening. 6 days a week. I was knackered constantly. And I was just eating on the go all the time. I would eat in a restaurant 3 times a day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. And I was eating meat with every meal. And I was just feeling sluggish. I was just wasn't feeling good. And I started looking online about diets to feel better or whatever. And it kept coming up plant-based. So I watched someone did a talk for an audience, and everything he said just made complete sense. So I just thought, okay, I need to try something. And I'm quite a drastic person. If I do something, I'm all in. So I thought, let me try it for a month. So went off to Whole Foods, bought loads of tofu and stuff. Didn't really know what I was doing.
Love a bit of tofu.
And after a month, I just felt great. Skin cleared up, was sleeping better, recovering faster in the gym. Just felt really good. I was enjoying discovering new foods. I'd never eaten quinoa before. How
great.
amazing, right?
I would say I'm 80% actually like plant-based and like
Yeah, because we went for that steak once and you didn't even go anywhere near it. You just like,
veggies I ordered, didn't I?
yeah.
See? So I'd say it's 80%, but I mean, I'm still like kind of into my seafood. So, yeah. I think that this has been one of the best talks that we've done because I really think we've had such an incredible amount of information and action points for people. And I think these are action points that everybody could do. It's not just in dentistry, but across the board. But particularly because I said dentists find it really uncomfortable. You obviously have achieved so much, and as always, we only scratched the surface. And you know, Loui is the kind of person I think we need to invite back for also like
it's so refreshing to have you answer the questions in such a sort of simple, clear, open way. It's refreshing to see that.
But I always like to end these podcasts with a question that I haven't prepared you with. I haven't prepared anything anyways. Loui would never let me do that. But I want to ask you, what are you most proud of?
Do you know what? I did and it's a lot for me. It won't be a lot for some people, but again, we talk about how we compare ourselves to ourselves, not to other people. During lockdown, I saw groups of friends go in one of two directions. Some of them went into partying, drinking, like that way, and others went into sports and exercise, and it's saying it was a real like polarizing time, right? And I went the health direction, and I started running. I'd never been a runner, never really ran that much, and I ran a marathon, then did an ultra marathon, and then my friend said to me, what could we do that would be scary? And we said 100k without any training.
Oh my God.
And I got to about 60k into it.
Yeah.
And my knee was like twice the size. I was done.
Yeah.
And I still had over a marathon to go.
Yeah.
100-kilometer run.
Yeah. And I got to a point where in that 100k, I wanted to quit so badly. Like I'd had enough. My body was battered. It was the most uncomfortable. It was probably the most physically uncomfortable I've ever been.
How long does it take?
About 13 hours.
13 hours?
Yeah. And
I thought it'd take longer.
And I managed to
He's fast.
Keep going and get to the end. And I'm able to look back on that and pull so much strength from it when things get hard, because I know I've been to like the darkest place I could go and then gone beyond it. And so now when really challenging stuff comes up, I'm able to lean into it. And that happens, I can call on it all the time.
Do you think it's transferable?
Yes, 100% transferable.
But you can transfer that strength to me.
No.
Not to you. No,
without me having
you
to
can
do
transfer it, but you can transfer it from different things. So if you've gone into like this is why, for example, if you look at Ironman competitors, the average income of an Ironman competitor, amateur in the US, I believe, is £250,000 a year salary. And there's a reason, because the mindset that you need to complete an Ironman is consistent with the mindset that you need to be a high performer in work. And what you'll find is that the mentality that you need when you're in these incredibly hard physical challenges is the same mindset you need to excel in all areas of life. So what I got from that, being in that very, very uncomfortable physical position, was we've got so much more in the tank than we think we have. Yeah. We can endure so much more than we think we can endure. And look, I've got friends that run 100 miles, 120 miles. So 100k is not a world record by any stretch of the imagination. People do them every weekend. But for me, I'd never ran further than 50k. I was broken. I was ready to quit, and I pushed through it. And I can look back on that and think,
I did it.
Okay, when hard stuff comes up, I've got that to reflect on. And that's why I would recommend to people, again, not saying this is what you should do, but I've got benefit from it. Try and pick stuff that's really hard, but that doesn't require any skill. There's no real skill in running 100k. You just need to be willing to go through it. Go out and push yourself in that respect, because it will cross over to other things.
I'm starting drama school again on that note.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Stuff that's scary.
But you know why? Because I love drama, and I was like straight A's in English lit and drama, and I loved it. And you know what, I was like, it's going to be scary to go back to drama school, and it's no pressure, because you know what, if I can't fail anything, you know, like I'm doing it for me and I'm challenging myself. So I think, you know, that's a really important message for people to really to estimate. And also reflecting on what you said now, you just said as well, it's about that mental, with the Ironman analogy. It's the same with dental school, by the way, because the stuff they make you do,
it's part of it.
It's actually testing your resilience and how you perform under pressure. It's not like you have to know the whole textbook, because they literally like make you learn medicine in like 2 years, as well as doing a million things. It's about your resilience, how you work under pressure, and your response. And that's the key thing that they're testing.
But
So
the question about, is it transferable? What was the name of that guy, Spencer, that you went?
the sober rave, Spencer Matthews.
Yeah, so I heard him on, was it Diary of a CEO? Someone on a podcast. Maybe it was on
Dan's, yeah.
Dan's podcast.
Yeah.
And he said something about a marathon in the ice. For me, it sounded like a nightmare, total nightmare. And he got COVID in the middle of it, and he carried on through it. But my point is, I then ended up in some train station, half an hour walk to where I had to go to, and it was raining. I would have hated my life. Uber wasn't working in Peterborough, wherever I was. And I thought of him, and I thought, what's this? I could do this.
I've got another 100k coming up in
Interesting
8 weeks, actually.
Yeah.
Oh man, I can't believe, are
Tuscany.
there people who do it every weekend?
There's events on regularly. I've got one in March in Tuscany, but it's a trail, so this one's going to be harder because it's elevation. Yeah, but the reason I chose Tuscany was, at least if it's really horrible, the scenery is beautiful, and afterwards the pasta's going to be incredible. So
Such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure,
Thank you.
Loui.
So
It's
much.
been amazing. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.